Welcome to LiveDaf, your online Daf Yomi Shir.
Shalom Aleichem, and welcome back to today's Daf Hayomi Avodah Zarah Mem Vav. We are holding 8 lines off the top of the Amud. Tani Tana, there was a Chacham who presented a Braisa, a halacha, kamei before the Rav Sheshes, as follows: Ha'akum, so the Goyim ha'ivdim esaharim, who worship mountains, Pesach or hills, Hein mutarin, so those landmarks are resistant to this type of activity, right? They're immune. They don't become affected, they don't become forbidden, as we learned the other day, because they are mechubar lakarka, naturally occurring landmarks. So Avodah Zarah does not make them usher. But here's the catch: on a personal level, the guy has worshipped an idol. Those who serve these objects, these phenomena, b'saif, they are guilty of Avodah Zarah, resulting in the saif penalty applied by the Bezdin. Rashi explains, even Goyim are obliged to abstain from idol worship. It's one of the 7 Noachide laws. Consequence being saif, being put to death by sword. So if he worships a mountain, the mountain is still perfectly mutter, it's permissible to use, but the worshipper is guilty of Avodah Zarah and the subsequent penalties. Alternatively, if he worships plants or vegetables, and those items now become asur, those plants are affected, and likewise, the worshippers are guilty of Avodah Zarah with its designated consequence. So Rav Sheshes, upon hearing this presentation, says, look, Amar Leis, he tells him, the Amalach Mani, who's telling you this? Who's the author of this halacha? Rabbi Yosef Ridahi. Apparently, it's limited to Rabbi Yosef Ridahi's opinion, because he holds. The Amar, he's the one who told us yesterday that even if the plant, the vegetable, was not really planted for Avodah Zarah purposes, it was just planted for regular use, and then afterwards worshipped, he holds that the future growth becomes affected, becomes asur. The Amar, he says, Ilan Shanata, Ilan that was planted, a tree that was just planted for benign purposes, then worshipped later on, asur. The new growth, the future growth becomes asur. Likewise, your Zraim, your Yerakais, and the Bryce that you presented. Asks the Gemara, why was he forced to interpret this brisa according to this particular opinion? Why can't you just establish the case as being Bizraim Shazaran Mitchila Lakach? This is the Bach who tweaks it. Bizraim Shazaran Mitchila Lakach. Just like by a tree that was planted for Avodah Zarah. We're speaking about plants, vegetables, planted for this purpose in mind. Shazaran Mitchila Lakach, in which case all agree. Even the Rabbanan agree. The entire entity becomes asur. We can't say we're speaking about this case. Because the Brisa paired it together, sort of compared these plants, dumya dahar, comparable to the mountain. Mahar shilunata b'tchil lekach, just like by the mountain, it was not established for this in mind. With this in mind, it was just a mountain, right? Av hainami, likewise, the other items in this Brisa presumably have the same, or similar properties. Shaloi not mitchil lekach, that were not planted for this purpose. So initially it was just a benign plant. Then worship later, it still affects it going forward. Itmar, we have learned about a case of avnei har shenidaldul. So again, the mountain itself is unaffected. What about some of those rocks or boulders that got detached, now off the ground? Nidaldul, they got loose, they're now disconnected. And the guy worshipped those stones. Interesting shaila, because technically it's part of the mountain, but not really, because it's no longer attached to the mountain. Perhaps it's considered a separate entity. It's like any other item or object. which is considered Avodah Zarah material with all its ramifications. There's a machlokes between Bnei, the sons of Rabbi Chia, whose names were Chizkiah and Yehuda, as opposed to Rabbi Yochanan, who disagreed with them. Now, we're not sure exactly who said what. One said it's okay, one said it's not. Chad Amar, one maintained Asurais, those stones are forbidden. They're deemed Avodah Zarah material, but Chad Amar Mutaris, the other one disagreed, he said they're okay. They're part of the mountain, which remains unaffected. My time at the Manda Amar Mutaris. How would you explain the opinion that they're okay? Kahar, they're comparable to the actual mountain, where they came from. Mahar, just like the mountain itself, is immune to this type of activity. Why? Because the mountain has no element of human intervention. It's not man-made, right? Mahar she'emo tfisasi de'adam. There's no element of human involvement. Therefore, it remains resilient to this type of activity. Umutar, as we learned yesterday. Afani, likewise, these stones. She'emo and tfisas de'adam. They weren't man-made items. Umutar, hence, they remain unaffected. Well, how can you compare the detached stones to the attached mountain? Malahar, perhaps the mountain is different. Shekem mechubar, still attached, as opposed to the stones which have been detached. Maybe they are susceptible. Well, we could undo that distinction by taking a look at an animal, a behemoth. Techiach, that will disprove this distinction, right? Because, as we know, if one worships, bows to an animal, so although the animal cannot be used for a carbon, it's called ne'avad, but that's because there are higher standards with respect to carbon suitability. Which means to say that for mundane personal use, the animal is fine, despite it being a detached item. Likewise, these detached stones. Well, malabahim, how could you prove from an animal? Shegem balas chaim, it has its own advantage, its own redeeming factor. It's a living being. That's why perhaps it's unaffected by my activity with the animal, as opposed to a detached stone which doesn't have that quality. Well, har yechiach. Let's go over to the third peg of this equation. The mountain itself disproves this suggestion, because the mountain itself is not a balachai, it's not a living being, and remains resilient to this type of activity. But we're going to go back and forth between all three. Basically, how can we determine what is the defining factor? The element found in one is not found in the other, so you can't attribute it to that element. For instance, the animal is a balchai, but the mountain doesn't have that, and it's still resilient. Oh, the animal is attached. Well, you can't say that's the reason, because the balchai is not attached and still immune. The element found here is not found there, so you can't attribute it to those reasons. So you have to find something common to both. So what's the common denominator between mountain and animal? They're not man-made items. They don't contain an element of human interaction, of human, doing. Therefore, they remain unaffected by this Avodah Zarah activity. Likewise, other items, like those boulders on the mountain, there's no element of human doing there. Perhaps they should also be considered immune to this type of activity. Well, but let's take a look at another common factor found by mountain and animal. They're different than the detached boulders, because mountain and animal have never taken on a new form. They're pristine. They're still in their original form. So since they're presenting as a totally natural phenomenon, they're unaffected by Avodah Zarah, as opposed to those stones which have come apart, come loose. They went through a transformation of some sort. Perhaps they are no longer considered pristine natural phenomena and could be impacted by Avodah Zarah. Okay, we'll address that by doing a slight shift. We're going to form a joint source by combining an animal, but not a pristine animal, an unblemished, unchanged. No, behemoth bala samum, a blemished animal, which had undergone some element of transformation. It was a shinoi, right? It's no longer in its original format, umehar, and join it together with a mountain. So we'll take the balmum animal together with mountain, and now we'll draw a common denominator and say, look, they're both natural items, naturally occurring phenomena. So just like they're unaffected by Avodah Zarah, likewise these detached stones. Well, you'll argue and you'll say, animal is a living being. Of course it's resilient. Well, the mountain is not a living being, it's still resilient. Well, the mountain is attached. Well, the animal is not. Well, the animal is unchanged, as opposed to the stones off the mountain. Well, the animal is a balasmo. Remember, it's a balasmo. Of course it was changed. Still, it remains immune. Likewise, our item. Vinami, alternatively, you can have another sort of joint source, behema, tama, umilan yavish. Pair together a pristine, unblemished animal, which was worshipped. Join it together with a tree that died, that dried up on you, and then was worshipped. And both we say that they remain unaffected by Avodah Zarah activity. Likewise, our loose stones. Well, you say the tree is mechuber lekarka, it's attached. Well, not so the animal. Well, the animal is in its pristine form, unaffected, unchanged from the original, as opposed to our stones. Well, go to the tree, which just turned dry, totally transformed, and still it's unaffected. So you join together these two items to provide that sort of common denominator. Source, that anything natural is unaffected by Avodah Zarah. Likewise, these stones on the mountain, which were not man-made items. So that explains the lenient approach to consider these stones resilient, unimpacted by Avodah Zarah activity. Uman da Asr, the opposing view, who says these stones are affected. I understand you can find sources, but that's exactly what the Torah emphasizes and re-emphasizes. Distance yourself. Consider it despicable. Tayat to over and over again. To preempt any attempt at mitigating the severity of Avodah Zarah materials. The avak of the Asya Medina later, even if you discovered a channel, a possible source to permit these stones, loy tas, you should not go down that route. You shouldn't draw out and produce a heter. Okay, so bottom line is, a mountain itself unaffected, an animal unaffected. Stones that came loose, machlekas, between Yehuda and Chizkiah, the sons of Rabbi Chia and Rabbi Yochanan. Now, who said what? We're not sure, but this time perhaps we can clarify the Bnei Rabbi Chia the Sharu. It was actually Yehuda and Chizkiah, the sons of Rabbi Chia, who permitted it. How do I know? The Boy Chizkiah, one of those individuals, had an interesting question that can perhaps shed light on his position regarding the stones. Zakav beitza l'shtach b'slo. Mao. For Yid took an egg, he stood it upright. Right? He positioned it upright with the intent of bowing to it. Mao, what is the status of that stone? Now, Kasaka Daitak, we figured at this point in our conversation, l'shtach b'slo b'shtach v'lo. He planned on bowing, and he did bow. So what's the question? The question is, an egg is a naturally occurring phenomenon. It wasn't man-made. But haiski fasa, the fact that he lifted it upright, that he changed his position. The question is that a considerable a masa? Is that considered a sort of a change? Do we view it as impacted by human activity? Ihave masa, iloy have a masa. Do we now consider there to be, human intervention or not? Right? The fact that he changed his position, is that sufficient to make it susceptible to Avodah Zarah? But apparently, if not for the fact that he placed it in this position, it would not be affected. It wouldn't become asr. Why? Because by its very essence, an egg is a natural thing, not man-made. And this is despite the fact that it's not attached to the ground. So it's like those detached stones on the mountains. Shemamna, perhaps we can conclude from here that in fact it was Bnei Reb Chia, those are the ones who said the Sharu permitted those stones, just like this egg, which would be permitted, were it not for his meddling with the stone, with the egg. Lo, no, perhaps I can tell you, Bnei Reb Chia, the Asri, it was actually Bnei Reb Chia who forbade, who banned those stones. If and if in fact he bowed to this egg, even without changing his position, even without tinkering with it, it would be asur, because it's not comparable to a mountain. A mountain is attached to the ground. This is not. This is given to human to be used by humans. It's meant to serve humans. It's a different thing than a mountain. So how do we explain this question regarding the egg? What's he asking? If it's always asur. Here we're speaking about a unique case. True. He placed it upright with the intent of bowing to it, but he didn't carry it out. He didn't bow to it. So that's his question. Hold it. What kind of question is that? Luman. Again, whose opinion found elsewhere are we speaking about? Are we following? Are we going like the opinion that holds that an idol established by a Yid is asur right away, even before worshiping it? This is a discussion later on in the Masechta. We'll see Bez Hashem. So, according to that, Shita, asura, this egg is certainly asur immediately. No question. Even prior to worship. Well, according to the other Shita, that you have to wait until it's worshipped. So again, halei palcha, in this case, prior to bowing, there was no worship. So what's the shaila? Of course it's permissible. Of course the item is mutter. It must be speaking like this. A unique case. The Yid placed his egg upright with the plan, with the intent of serving, of bowing, of worshipping. But he didn't get around to it. And what happened? And a guy came around and bowed to it. And this question is actually very similar to the following scenario depicted by Rabbi Damar Shmuel. He deals with a similar case. So again, a Yisrael took his brick, stood it upright, with the intention of bowing to it. And before he got around to it, a guy came along and bowed. So he carried out the Yisrael's plan. What happens to that brick? Asura. It is considered forbidden material because it was worshipped. Again, because the Yisrael was Megala Das, indicated that he was agreeable to having this thing worshipped. It was a standing invitation, right? By standing up the brick, he was sort of inviting worshippers. Okay, so he was Megala Das, and therefore it's considered Avodah Zarah. So that's by the brick. Likewise, in our case of the egg, you can argue likewise that the Yisrael's act serves as a standing invitation, and likewise it should become asur by the guy bowing to it. So the question was like this. So he asked, "Leveinu the minkur skifasa." Perhaps you can say there's a difference when you stand a brick upright. Minkur is a kifasa. You can tell the difference. You can tell it's standing. It's a pronounced act. That's called a clear indication of intent. Aval beit, so by an egg, it's a small, insignificant item. Perhaps it doesn't have that same pronouncement, and therefore it doesn't have the same halacha. Or perhaps you don't differentiate. Whatever act he did to indicate plan, intention, for Ishtachavoya, for Avodah Zarah, that makes it susceptible to the guy's activity, and therefore it becomes asur. Take it, we leave it unresolved. Okay, so let's just recap quickly. We had a shaila regarding the mountain itself. If it was worshipped, it's still mutter, but the stones which came off the mountain, which came detached, which came loose, that was a machlokes. Shall we say it's like the mountain itself and remains unaffected? Shall we say it's different? We had a machlokes on that. And then we had an interesting machlokes regarding an egg that was repositioned, and the guy came and bowed to it. Shall we say it's like the brick that's asur or not? Boy, Rami Bar Chama. Now comes a new question posed by Rami Bar Chama. So bowing to a mountain doesn't impact the mountain. with respect to personal mundane use. What about if you want to use the mountain material for Beis HaMikdash purposes? It certainly has higher standards, right? Just like by the Baal Chai, a living being, a living animal. You bow to it, you can still use it for personal use, but you cannot bring it as a carbon. It's called ne'evad. Something which was worshipped is disqualified from hakrava. So a similar question regarding a mountain. If one bows to a mountain, avanav, so it's stones. Can you take stones and construction material, ma'ul mizbeach, and use it for the mizbeach and the Beis HaMikdash? Shall we say yesh ne'evad? It is considered disqualified and put into the category of ne'evad, something worshipped, which is not suitable for karban, b'mechuber, eitel gavaya. So perhaps this applies even to something which had been part of the ground, like a mountain. Is possible with respect to gavaya to Beis HaMikdash use. Oy ein ne'evad, b'mechuber eitel gavaya. Perhaps you can say that no, something which is connected to the ground, it's mechuber l'karka, never earns a title, the title of ne'evad, even with respect to higher use to Beis HaMikdash use. Now, in Tzalema, if you're going to say that yesh ne'evad b'mechuber etzel gavaya, you'll take the more strict approach that even mechuber is considered ne'evad and is disqualified for Beis HaMikdash use. Perhaps here it would be different, because it's only machshirei karban. It's only being used to facilitate karbanos. It's not actually a karban. It's being used to build a mizbeach on which you bring karbanos. Shall we say machshir karban ki karban are treated on the same level as the actual karban, ki karban damu, in which case they're pasul for mizbeach use, or perhaps not. So perhaps you can take stones off the mountain to build a mizbeach. Amar Kal V'chomer. I want to conclude that it's asr. I'll prove to you that it's asr. Huma esnan. Take a look at the esnan item. That's the gift given to the immoral woman, right? Shemutar b'talish lehedyot. If the gift entails an object, right, an item, that is fully permissible for an ordinary person to use. There's no isser to use that item afterwards. Still asr b'mechubel gavaya. But with respect to Beis HaMikdash use, right, like a carbon or whatever, you can't use it for the Beis HaMikdash. Even if you gave her mechuber, she got a house as a gift. How do I know? The pasuk says lo savi esnan zoyna mechir keleb, and the pasuk continues Beis Hashem. You can't use an esnan even if it's a Beis Hashem. If it's a building, you can't use it for the Beis HaMikdash. Okay, so you can't donate that house to the Beis HaMikdash to be used for, whatever. So we sort of see that there are two extreme sides of this spectrum. On the one hand, the esnan, with respect to an ordinary person's use, is fully mutter, even if it was a detached item given to her. Still, when it comes to Beis HaMikdash, we have way higher standards. Even if it was something attached to the ground given to her, it's us. Right? Certainly a nevad, an item that was worshipped. Nevad, it was worshipped. In that case, if it was a talosh, an ordinary item, it now becomes asr and off limits even for an ordinary person. You can't even take it for mundane use, for personal use. So it has that strictness. Certainly, wouldn't you think? Eino din, of course, it would lend to reason that with respect to using it in the Beis HaMikdash, sha'asr would be totally forbidden, b'mechuber, even if it was something attached to the ground, l'gavaya to the Beis HaMikdash. Right? So if we find that esnan, which on the one hand is very easy, still for gavaya it's very strict. Nevad, which is strict even with respect to personal, mundane use. Certainly we should be overly strict when it comes to Beis HaMikdash. Even something mechuber that was worshipped like a mountain cannot be used. So that was Rav. Amali Rav Huna b'Rav Yishua. The Rav Yishua responded to him, you know what, you can actually reverse the whole train of thought and produce a totally different conclusion and permit the mountain stones for the Beis HaMikdash. Go the other way around. It all depends on the starting point of this discussion. of this kal v'chomer. Instead of starting with esnan and moving on to nevad, start with nevad, the item that was worshipped. Ma nevad. Since we find by a nevad, she'asa b'tolosh etzel hedid. If it's a tolosh item, it's an ordinary, object, and it was worshipped, it cannot be used by even a hedyot, even a regular person. Still mutar mechubel gavaya. But if it's something attached to the ground like a mountain, it is permissible, even for Beis Hamikdash. Let's assume so. Shenamar, the pasuk says, only the statues, not the mountains. Eliheim alaharim, right? But the mountains itself are not considered their gods. And we assume, whether you try and take it for personal use, or you're donating it, it's mutar. So certainly an esnan, item given to the Zaina, shemuta v'hatalish lehedit, which is fully permissible for ordinary person to use, even if it's an ordinary item given to her. So we have that leniency. Certainly, and it wouldn't it lend to reason shemuta mechubel gavoy, that if it's something mechubar, sure, if it's an animal or something detached, you can use it for the Beis Hamikdash. But if it's something mechubar attached to the ground, perhaps it's unaffected by this gift giving, and it's mutar for the Beis Hamikdash use. Well, what about that pasuk that you quoted, Beis Hashem lekecha, which seems to indicate that even a structure is forbidden for Beis Hamikdash use if it was given to her in this context? That's needed for a totally different halacha. It's not coming to teach anything about this. Because the Sanya for the Brisa, Beis Hashem lekecha, it is limiting to us the scope of the esnan isser. It only affects karbanos, right? Things which are offerings. Prat lepara she'ene bala lebayis, as opposed to paraduma, right? The paraduma, even if it's an esnan, it can use it because it's never delivered to the Beis Hamikdash. It's sort of processed outside the Beis Hamikdash. The akrab and all that takes place on the harazesim. So it's not covered by this isser. It doesn't have to, conform to these guidelines. The Rabbi said, Rikuim, they learn Beis Hashem lekecha a little bit differently. It's actually a stringency that even the Rikuim, the gold plating of the walls of the Kodesh HaKadoshim, cannot be made using esnan material. But the bottom line is, according to this approach, which is Rav Huna Yeshua, instead of producing a strictness, produce a leniency. So back to the question. He worshipped a mountain. The mountain itself is still permissible. It's mutar, it's unaffected. What about taking material and using it for the Beis Hamikdash? Rava says, based on his kal v'chomer, it's aser, whereas Rav Huna, Rav Yeshua, retweaked the kal v'chomer and produced a leniency and was moderate. Amalei, so Rava responded, that's a rule. When faced with a double option, two ways of presenting a kal v'chomer, you meant to take the strict approach. That's the rule. I proposed a strict kal v'chomer. V'at amras l'kul, and you're presenting a kal v'chomer which with a lenient outcome. And the rule is kula v'chumra. When faced with two options, leniency or strictness, l'chumra parchina, and we present the kal v'chomer in a strict way. Papa responded to Rava, is that true? Whenever faced with the multiple option, a kal v'chomer that produces chumra or kula, what are we meant to do? We're not meant to use the one that produces the kula, really? Here's an example. V'azor de Pesach. This is a discussion back in Mesechas Pesachim. A fellow became tamei, touched the mace. They need to apply the paraduma waters on him. So happens to be the seventh day when he needs the water. It's Erev Pesach, when he bring the Korban Pesach, but it's Shabbos. On a Shabbos, he's not meant to do this. This is the Rabbanon to sprinkle the waters because it's Mesakin. It looks like you're fixing him. You're turning him from somebody who's tamei, making him tar. So it's a shvus. Withhold. The Rabbanon meant to stay put and not do it. But his Korban Pesach is on the line. What do we do? So there was a machlekes. V'hazor the Pesach, the pligi, there was a machlekes between Rabbi Lezer and Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Lezer holds l'chumra. He has a kal v'chomer there, and the Mishnah over there that just like you can do the shechita of the Pesach, even though it's a real malachim and Torah, certainly you can sprinkle the waters. So l'chumra, he produces an obligation, a strictness. This fellow has to proceed, go through the process, and bring the Korban Pesach. Right? Become a chayv of the gaver. According to Rabbi Lezer's strict kal v'chomer, this fellow is now obliged to get himself ready for the Korban Pesach. Whereas for Rabbi Akiva, his opponent Lakula, he actually goes the other way. He produces a kal v'chomer which produces a leniency and exempts this person from the sprinkling the waters in the Korban Pesach. Upater exempts him. Because Parach, Rabbi Kiva Lekulan, clearly Rabbi Kiva presents a Kal V'chomer, and which produces a leniency, despite having the option of going the other way and producing Kal V'chomer, which produces a strictness. That's not. We have the Mishnah, Heishav, Rabbi Kiva responds to Rabbi Lezer, Echila, perhaps reverse the Kal V'chomer and say like this: Uma haza'ashi mishum shvus. If even sprinkling the waters is also midrabanan, eino docha Shabbos, is not meant to override Shabbos. Right? Typically, we don't do it on Shabbos. Shchita shim, right? It's certainly the shchita the Korban Pesach, which is a malacha and a Torah. It's one of the 39 malachas. Like Koshkan, of course, you can't do it. Okay, and they went back and forth. But in any case, evidently, even when faced with a double option, we can pick the lenient route. Well, says the Gemara, actually, Rabbi Kiva wasn't really basing his opinion on this Kal V'chomer. It was just a mode of bringing out his a way of expressing his opinion. Because even he knew that you can do shchita of Korban Pesach on Shabbos. There's a pasuk for it. So all he was trying to say is that, you Rabbi Lezer once taught me that hazah is asur on Shabbos, even in this type of context, even at the expense of his Korban Pesach. So it wasn't really based on Kal V'chomer, so really it's not relevant to our discussion. Hasam over there in that story, Rabbi Lezer, Gomri actually taught Rabbi Kiva, had taught him in the past that it's forbidden. It so happens that he forgot this fact. Rabbi Kiva was simply trying to remind him, and he was doing it in this gentle way, and he was sort of presenting it as part of the equation of their back and forth. And that explains why Rabbi Kiva how he responded to Rabbi Lezer. He says, "Rabbi, my Rabbi, al tachpereni mishas hadin. Please don't deny during our discussion." Meaning, you yourself. Kach mekubel ani mimcha. I heard this from you. I learned this from you yourself. That hazah, applying the waters of the paraduma, is a shvus. It's forbidden midrabanan. Ve'enu dechel Shabbos. You can't do it on Shabbos. So there goes our reference. We thought it had to do with how to present a Kal V'chomer. Really, Rabbi Kiva's leniency, it was unrelated to a Kal V'chomer. It was actually a fact that was taught him by Rabbi Lezer, that this fellow will not be available for the paraduma since it's Shabbos, even though it's at the expense of the Korban Pesach. Okay, so again we had this discussion, this question posed by Rami Bar Chama. If one vows to a mountain, the mountain itself is exempt from any consequences in terms of mundane use. What about for heavenly use? For instance, using the stones to construct a mizbeach. According to Rava, it would be asur. According to Rav Huna Rishua, it's okay. Here comes question number 2 posed by Rami Bar Chama. A similar question. By Rami Bar Chama. If one bows to standing grain, to wheat that's standing, it's already grown. He bows to it thinking this is going to be his way of currying favor with the power of wheat, to give him sustenance, to provide him with his bounty. Okay? That's what he's thinking. So he's bowing to it. The wheat certainly remains unaffected because it's mechuber l'karka. Question is, can I use it as a mincha? Can I take the kernels, turn it into flour, process it for mincha, carbon mincha material for the Beis HaMikdash, ma'alo menachos? So what's the question? So this question is really linked to the previous question, meaning, assuming that there is a concept of nevad b'mechubar eitzel gavoya, meaning worshipping a naturally occurring phenomenon which is still attached to the ground, such as the mountain, such as the wheat, although it remains unaffected for personal use, for mundane purposes, but it is labeled a nevad. It's considered a worshipped item and disqualifies it for higher, Beis HaMikdash use. Assuming that's the case. But here perhaps it's different. You know why? Because you're not using the actual original material for the mincha. Nobody brings kernels into the Beis HaMikdash. You process it into flour. So perhaps that shinoi, that transformation, allows it to sort of let go of its problematic label. It loses its nevad status because it's no longer the original item. It takes on a new form. Perhaps it's okay to be used in the Beis HaMikdash. Yesh shinu, shall we say, this shinu, this process, this change that it went through. Benevad, can benefit even a worshipped item and make it permissible. Perhaps Shina will not benefit this item. Let me try to prove this from halacha. So we have all forbidden animals. Let's say an animal which was worshipped, nevad, or there was revia done to it, there was interaction with a human, so they become unfit for carbon use. What about their offspring? The animal has a baby. Well, at the same return, their offspring are acceptable for mizbeach use. So that's the shita of the chachamim. But Tani Allah, we have a brisa which adds another opinion onto this. Rabbi Lezer Oyser says you can't use it. And the word is assuming this machlokes connects to our discussion. The question is whether Shina, you see, this unborn, animal was now born, right? So it went through that transformation, that change. So perhaps, although initially it was affected by the mother animal and attained the same status, which made it puzzle from Mizbeach, but now it took on a new form, a new shape. It's a born animal, independent of the mother. That would be the reason for the Chachamim permitting the animal for Mizbeach use, whereas Rabbi Lezer says, Shina, still the same material, just because it presents differently, it remains us. There you go. So our question is really resolved because it's a machlokes. No, unrelated, says the Gemara. Haven't we ever explained that the correct approach to understanding that machlokes is as follows? It's unrelated to the question of shinui. No. Amar Rav Nachman, Amar Rabba Ravua, machlokes. That whole discussion, meaning the reason why the Rabbanan permit the offspring for mizbeach use is speaking kishenirbu. So the animal was violated. And then it became impregnated with this offspring. So the question is like this. Sure, the mother animal serves as one cause element in creating this offspring, but there's a father animal as well. So it's called zeh v'zeh germ. You have two causation effects. Two germim bringing about this result. Can I just ignore one and reckon with the other? Can I ignore the mother animal, which is usher, and just reckon with the father animal and consider this offspring to be kosher for mizbeach use? That's the Tanakama, that's the Chacham. Rabbi Lezer says, no, zev is a germ is usher. As long as there's one problematic element involved in generating this result, in this case the mother animal, that's sufficient to disqualify the child. That's all. That's the machlokes. Nothing to do with shinui, right? Aval ibru l'b'seif nirbu. In fact, if the animal had already been mu'beres, carrying this offspring within it, and then it was violated while carrying this offspring, Dibra kol asur, and all would agree that's asur, because the animal itself, the unborn animal, which is now born, had taken part in this experience, this sinful experience that the mother experienced. Despite the fact that now it's a born child, a new entity, it looks different, it presents different, it doesn't matter. Because ultimately it's the same material. The same story with us. He bowed to the wheat, turned it into flour. It certainly would be usher. It's like the second case here, where it was violated and then, it was in existence, Ibru, the fetus was there, in this case the wheat was there, and then it was violated, and then it was bound to, in the case of the wheat. So turning it into flour wouldn't be serve as any saving grace. Some had a slightly different version of this back and forth. So again, the question was, wheat that was worshipped and then turned into flour, is it fit for service? We attempted to prove from the story of the animal, and that was presented by Mar Zutra, Breder of Nachman. So actually, he didn't just present the machlokes and allow us to counter it. He himself continued. He said, look this. Here's the machlokes regarding the offspring of this forbidden animal. And you should know, actually we have this explanation provided on that brayso. Amar Nachman, Amar Rabba Ravua, machlokes kishenirbu. Yeah, that whole discussion only pertains to where it was violated and then it became impregnated. Then we have a shita which says it's okay because the uber was generated by the mother, which is asur, and also by the father, which is mutter. So we have a question of whether we have to reckon with the problematic element or not. In the case where the animal was already carrying the offspring within it, and then it was violated, so the animal inside took part in that experience. All agree it's asur, even after it's born, and it presents differently because we don't care. It's the same material. Likewise, in the case of the wheat, it maintains its forbidden status. So the case of the wheat is comparable to this last scenario where it existed and then was violated. So although it undergoes some sort of change afterwards, in this case turned into flour, it doesn't matter, it's still asur. Well, how can you compare one to the other? There's good reason to believe that although in the case of the animal, the offspring remains asur and doesn't lose its earlier status, but wheat turned into flour, perhaps it's an entirely new entity, entirely new form. How can you compare? Awesome. There, mikara behema, vashta behema. The newborn was a behema even before being born. It was an animal, and it's now an animal. It simply was locked in there. A dasha, the doorway, so to speak, who the achiza, or the achida, ba'anpa, was locked before it, so it couldn't get out. So of course, we don't view it as a new entity. But hacha, over here by the wheat, turned flour, initially it was wheat. It was one type of item. Now it's flour. This wasn't worshipped. It presents differently as a new form. So perhaps it's not mo'os, it doesn't have that status. It's no longer despicable, it's not something which would be disqualified for mizbeach use. Okay, let's do a quick chazara. We started with the mountains, which are unaffected by Avodah Zarah. However, the worshipper himself gets punished full force because he himself did an act of Avodah Zarah. What about the stones that came loose? Machlekes. What about the brick picked up by the Yid for Avodah Zarah purposes? It becomes asur even if a guy came along and worshipped it. By the egg, we're not sure. The first of Rabbi Bar Chama's questions was, what about the stones off that mountain? Can we use it for the Beis HaMikdash, for the Mizbeach? So Rabbi says no. Rav Huna Rishua says yes. The second question was, even if we say that it's considered asur for Mizbeach, it's called Yesh Nevat Gavaya, but if there's a shinoi, if it's reprocessed like the wheat turned into flour, another interesting question which was left unresolved. All the best to you and Hatzlacha.